David Lynch is easily one of the most unique and creative auteurs when it comes to filmmaking. He's one of the greatest filmmakers of all time because of how he's able to transform his very weird style into some of the most emotional and creative art in the world of cinema. It's what makes him so special to me personally, even to a point where he has probably become my favorite filmmaker. Thus, he is the subject of the first installment of my brand new Director's Ranking series. I've wanted to make this one for a while, so I'm making it now. These are going to be a series of videos where I rank a director's work from worst to best while undergoing a personal exploration as to why the director is uniquely genius. So without further ado, let's get started. Dune is Lynch's worst directorial effort, no doubt. It is often seen as the sore thumb in his incredible filmography, and it's not hard to see why. Frank Herbert's classic story is extremely dense and notoriously hard to adapt. For Lynch to try and put his weird and offbeat direction into an already convoluted story makes for a film that feels devoid of any real emotional investment for the viewer. Couple that with the numerous exposition dumps, strange whispering monologues, and heavily dated special effects, and it comes across as Lynch desperately trying to make an interesting movie despite having no interest in making it. In fact, Lynch's feelings of this movie are among the most infamous accounts of a director's hatred of their own productions. Lynch's lack of say and the studio's constant bombardment of his creative vision has led him to call this experience of making this film a nightmare on several occasions. It shows that he put clear thought into making it, and the actors do what they can, but the pacing and general bad decisions throughout really tanked this movie overall. Not a terrible movie, but glad there was a visionary who was able to pick the story back up and give us a proper adaptation with Denis Villeneuve's version. David Lynch's 10th and most likely final film is perhaps his most surreal and nightmarish to date. Basically, it's a 3-hour Lynchian nightmare with less than stellar visual cleanliness paired with some of the most terrifying imagery Lynch has ever created. While it is just a bunch of connected scenes when Lynch was experimenting with his PD-150 camcorder, it still retains a string of events that make sense when you put them together. I feel that 3 hours really does start to drag by the end, however, it is overall definitely better than Dune. Laura Dern is extremely good in this movie as 4 separate characters, as she plays them all very convincingly throughout the film. I will say that I have very little to say about this movie aside from the filmmaking, but it is a very interesting movie in that aspect, and only in that aspect. The actual story is a lot less well thought out in comparison to something like Mulholland Drive, in my opinion, but it does offer an interesting moral core, and the filmmaking makes for a fascinating experience. This will probably be my most controversial placement, but yeah, this film is this low for a reason. Is it bad? God no. It's such an emotionally rich film with some of the best performances in Lynch's filmography. Witnessing a man fight for his acceptance and grasp for humanity is a very powerful story. To me, this is a movie with a lot of emotional depth and not a core to dig around in, whereas my favorite David Lynch movies have a lot of interesting ideas to dig through, and it's the emotion that's at the core. Now, you might call me a hypocrite for another movie that's higher on the list that is definitely more normal and probably Lynch's most humanistic film, definitely more so than this. However, I feel that The Elephant Man is very conflicted with the type of tone it wants to portray for its narrative, whereas that movie embraced the tone that it wanted to go for. A great movie, just not one of my favorites. As the name implies, this movie is truly wild. Yes, I am very creative. But this movie is probably Lynch at his most fun. Though it does have its disturbing moments, watching these two characters is very endearing to watch. Nicolas Cage and Laura Dern have this burning flame of love for each other, and god damn it, it's just so engrossing to watch their adventure. Yet there seems to be something missing from the film. Maybe it's lacking in those interesting ideas, and this is a more simple movie, similar to The Elephant Man, but it does have those interesting ideas as it has comparisons to The Wizard of Oz, and even references to that movie. So I think it may be because I have an unawareness to those ideas, I don't know. Either way, it's a really fun movie to watch in David Lynch's filmography. At first, I didn't really understand this movie, and for a while, it was one of my least favorite David Lynch films. However, I recently rewatched it for this, and I must say, this movie is really, really great. While Wild at Heart is very fun and laid back, Lost Highway is vicious and aggressive. The movie feels very industrial, which makes sense given that the main theme song for it is written and performed by Nine Inch Nails. That decision to layer the soundtrack in such a genre really adds to the harsh atmosphere. This is the first movie on the list that has all the elements that makes David Lynch so special for me in terms of storytelling, with a lot of interesting ideas to dig through that results in an emotional core full of lust, anger, and confusion. The filmmaking does everything within its power to communicate those feelings to the viewer. Throw in a story of mystery and romance with elements of neo-noir, and it becomes a beast of a movie, and one that I've grown to respect while venturing into Lynch's career. As I alluded in the Elephant Man section, I might be coming across as a massive hypocrite when I say that I love this movie. In my defense, it is one that never dared to be a Lynchian movie in the first place, and maybe is the least David Lynch movie, less so than Dune. With all that being said, I love this movie. This was the film that proved to me that David Lynch was more than an oddity artist. He's a legitimate filmmaker capable of an amazingly compelling story without the use of his surrealist creations. The late great Richard Farnsworth delivers a phenomenal final performance. His fragile exterior makes his harrowing and meticulous interior even more impressive. Alvin Straight is an emotionally rich character that becomes the body of this story. The conversations that he has with the people that he meets along with his arduous journey are witty and sometimes very emotional. It all adds up to be a truly underappreciated movie in my opinion. Honestly, if I were judging it based on how much I loved the movie, it would be even higher than number 5. Don't get me wrong, I adore this film, but in comparison to the actual number 4 and number 3 on this list, it might be the better film, but it isn't the better David Lynch film. Like I mentioned with The Elephant Man and Wild at Heart, David Lynch's films are at their best when there are plenty of ideas to dig through, and sitting somewhere in the middle is an emotional core that latches onto the viewer. That is an attribute that we're going to see for all 4 of the subsequent movies. By all accounts, Twin Peaks is my favorite TV show of all time. From the amazing cast of characters and satirical edge of the original show, to the eerie and realistic darkness of The Return, Twin Peaks is an amazingly special piece of art that I will cherish for a very long time. But the connection between Twin Peaks and The Return is Fire Walk with Me, and is possibly one of the best character studies in cinematic history. Featuring one of the loudest 180 of tones between the original show and this movie, Fire Walk with Me is David Lynch falling back in love with the character of Laura Palmer and giving her a very humanistic yet horrifying telling of her story, while effortlessly paving the way for the return by giving off a subversion of expectations of what's to come for the world of Twin Peaks. You could tell that Lynch really wanted to savor the justice of Laura Palmer, especially thanks to one of the greatest performances of all time given by Cheryl Lee. She's so fantastic in conveying such a palpable sense of terror, and it makes her story so emotional. I'd say that The Return is the best that Twin Peaks has ever gotten. It's everything that Lynch had built up Twin Peaks to that point and explodes with creativity. But Fire Walk with Me was that connecting piece to the puzzle, and it did everything so well when it comes to adding to the masterful story of Twin Peaks. And now for me, we're in all-time favorites territory. To me, Eraserhead will always be one of the most inspirational films. David Lynch being able to craft this masterpiece under tight budget constraints and not much support can only come from someone who's committed to his craft. I mentioned before with The Elephant Man that sometimes the muddling of tones can ruin the momentum of some of David Lynch's work, but this movie feels simultaneously like a 50s B movie and an early David Cronenberg effort, and it's genius. It works so well in bringing in a unique experience for audiences. Jack Nance is perfect as Henry Spencer, who was so dedicated to the role he kept that iconic hairdo for the entire 5-year filming process. The sound design by Lynch and his assistant Alan Splett is truly revolutionary, full of spacey synth noises, industrial whirs and bangs, and cleverly used Fats Waller organ tracks that make some scenes feel like a vaudeville act. It makes the world feel so unique and unforgettable. Of course, you can't talk about Eraserhead without talking about The Baby. It is still one of the most impressive practical effects of all time, especially given the movie's tight budget. The effects for The Baby probably look a bit dated now, but don't you dare tell me that that final scene is not in any way effective. It's probably Lynch's simplest film, and the core of the film being about anxieties and fears of settling down and becoming a parent is pretty transparent. It's a movie, whether it was the Lynchian imagery or the process of actually making it happen, was begging to shine with creativity, which is what I appreciate most. It was my first David Lynch movie, and it still holds a special place in my heart. When I first watched it, I almost clearly knew that I was in the hands of a master. His mixture of lightness with darkness in this world is done incredibly well, especially how the characters portray the vast dichotomy of such. Frank Booth is my favorite villain in movie history and another one of my all-time favorite performances. Dennis Hopper's performance is so good at blurring the line between the idea that this psychopath is simultaneously a real person as well as a symbol or a cipher of the visceral nature of nightlife. It's also just all around well written and to me one of the most engaging films ever made. The mystery aspects work so well in pulling you into this world, or in this case these two worlds. It's not really two worlds, it's just the dichotomy of regular life and the adult world. It's the reason why this and my number one are proof that when Lynch does mystery, it makes for the best possible results of his style. From a character standpoint, this is also possibly David Lynch's best. The way the characters reflect off of the light versus dark themes are so well communicated and interesting. In my opinion, if you're getting into David Lynch, this is the movie to start with. A movie that I was debating putting in my top 10 favorites of all time for a little while. It is everything I love about David Lynch and more. I'll start by saying that this movie is the closest that any movie has come to truly feeling like I was in the midst of an abyss while watching it. The characters are nearly just as well written in Blue Velvet, and it's among David Lynch's most engaging films on a surface level. Naomi Watts delivers yet another one of my favorite performances in her double role. The neo-noir mixed with the dazzling 50s Hollywood aesthetics makes you unsure of the world around you. The script is something that I haven't really mentioned when it comes to David Lynch. This one in particular is able to give a great surface level storyline and amazing characters, yet gives you so many interesting ideas to dig through. You end up getting lost in the whole mystery, and it only ends when you come to your own conclusion. It is one of cinema's most effective movies ever. It is one of the most memorable and interesting, yet terrifying and disturbing movies ever made. There are very few movies that have been able to take hold of my body as much as this has. It truly feels like I'm inside of a deep, dank, dark cave, and I can't escape unless I come to a stopping point. It is a true masterpiece in every sense of the word. It's not just the best David Lynch film, but it's one of the best films of all time. Thank you so much for watching. Please exit this video more interested in the world of film. Also, if you liked this and want more, please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube, where I plan on doing more videos about films. Thank you very much, and goodbye.